Hi everyone. In the last lesson we set up this V-Ray water material, and in this lesson we're going to start dealing with some of the other materials in the scene. So I've actually already gone ahead and created most of the materials that we'll need. I think there's a lot of other really good video tutorials out there that explain in depth about creating V-Ray materials, so I'd recommend checking some of those out. But I will just show you a few of these to show you some of the settings that I'm using. Most of them are pretty standard. I'm just using the V-Ray material for most of them, but a few of them are a little bit more interesting. So first let's take a look at these sloping concrete walls. So that's this material here. You can see I just have 3 different JPEG textures being plugged into this. If we take a look at one of these, we have a diffuse color, there's a reflection color, and then there's a bump. So we have the diffuse color being plugged into here, then we have this reflection plugged into here, and then we have the bump map plugged in down here. And I've set the multiplier a little bit lower so it's not as pronounced. So if you want the reflections to be stronger, you have a few different options. You could actually edit this texture in Photoshop to make it brighter, or you can scroll down to the color balance here and start to increase this color offset. You'll see it gets brighter, and you should see the reflections get stronger. But what I want to do is more of a curves adjustment that you could do in Photoshop. So I created this remap HSV node. You can do this just by typing in HSV. You can create one of these right here. And then with this, you just plug this JPEG texture into the color here, and then you can start adjusting these curves here, the hue, the saturation, and in this case the value. So I'm just cranking this up a little bit. If you click this arrow box here, you can get a larger graph that you can work with, and you can start moving this around. So that's basically just increasing some of the bright areas in here so we get a little bit more pronounced reflections and glossiness. And I've turned this down a little bit so it's got some blurred reflections. Another thing I would like to point out is that whenever I import textures in here, I usually turn the filter type to off. By default, I think it comes in as quadratic, and it kind of blurs the texture a little bit, and I like to have them be nice and sharp when it renders, so I usually just turn this off. And another thing that I like to do is create one place 2D texture and connect it to all of the textures. That way I can adjust the UVs and it will do it to all of them together, instead of by default each one has its own place 2D texture node. So sometimes that's more convenient. Okay, so let's apply this material to these sloping sides. And we don't see anything because we don't have any UVs on them yet. So if we go up to create UVs, we'll just use the automatic mapping. That's something that I use most of the time. So there we go. And let's open up our UV texture editor. And if you turn on this little blue square here, it makes them easier to see. And if we go over to UVs, select them all, and we can start to scale this so it looks right. You know, this is just a tileable image, so we'll get some repeating there, but it shouldn't matter too much, especially because of the angle that we're at. We'll just scale this down to something that looks kind of right. You can also move it around if you want. Okay, so I think that'll work for now. The next thing we can look at is the material that's going to go on these V columns here. That's another type of concrete that I've made. So for this one, I'm actually using the V-Ray blend material, which you can just create over here. And then I've got two standard V-Ray materials that are being plugged into it. So each one of these has, slightly different properties. They're both using the same color, but one is a little bit darker, one's a little bit lighter. And for that, I've just adjusted the amount here. So this amount here is just controlling how bright they are. This one has the bump map applied to it. This one doesn't. And they're just both being plugged into this V-Ray blend material. One's the base material, one is the coat material. You can keep adding more materials. It'll keep adding up. And then you can control the blending with this blend amount here. So that's has this texture in here controlling that. If we were to remove this, you can see as we move this slider back and forth, it'll switch between the light material and a dark material. And then when we apply this, it's using the dark and light values in this texture to blend between the two materials. So let's apply this to this column here. And then we'll use the same automatic mapping for this. We'll open up our texture editor here. And one thing, if you're not seeing the right texture here, you can go up to textures in the UV texture editor, and you can choose which one actually displays in the viewport. So I just want to see the color, which is fine. Let's select the UVs, and we'll just scale this up a little bit. There we go. Okay, next thing we can look at is the material for these curtains up here. This is a kind of thin object, fabric or paper or something like that. It doesn't have any thickness, but we kind of want to be able to see through it, so we want something with some translucency. So V-Ray has a good way of kind of faking that without actually using translucency, in which case you'd need to have object with thickness. But instead we can use the V-Ray two-sided material, which is right here. So I've already created one of those. So we'll just graph that. So basically our material here, we have a front material and a back material. And for this front material, this is just a standard V-Ray material. It's just a light gray material. Doesn't have any reflections or refractions or anything. That's just being plugged into the front. And it automatically makes that a single-sided sub-material. And the back material is left empty. And then we can kind of control the translucency of it with the slider here. So if we want it to be more solid, we can move it over here, or more translucent. Let's leave it kind of in the middle at the default. And then we'll apply that to all of these curtains. Okay, so the next material I want to look at is the metal that's going to go on the bottom of these surfaces here. I actually want to create some metal panels down here, and we'll take a look at this in the next video.